All right, all right. It is July 23rd, 2026, and we are live. This is Off the Record with Brian Hart. I am Brian Hart. Today we've got Ross Gerber, CEO of Gerber Kawasaki, Wealth and Investment Management. Ross, we're going to kick off talking about Mr. Musk, as you and I did it probably exactly this time last year. A lot has gone on since then. In a few minutes, actually, I think right now we're going to be bringing in Shana Sissel. Let me give her a proper introduction.
Hold on one sec, guys.
No problem. I'm going to pull you off screen. We're going to get going with Tesla. When your image pops up, you're in. So Ross, I'll give Shane a proper introduction when she jumps on. Let's kick it off. We're going to talk all things Musk, but first, we have Tesla earnings. Just came out. I saw you put out some commentary on that. Ross, can you break us down what you saw in that report that you like, that you're lukewarm on, and that you absolutely hate?
Well, we were kind of just bantering about this before. I like to start with the part I like, which is Tesla's still selling EVs and people want the EVs. And we're in a period of time with high gas prices, and it doesn't seem like that's going to go away. And it's really forced consumers to really rethink the wholesale use of gasoline as their main energy product, and it's become expensive for people. So Tesla had great numbers relative to the past year on EV sales. What stood out to me also was the services revenue grew by 50%, which is like all the support stuff around the EVs, full self-driving and all this kind of stuff. So the Tesla as the Apple model really continues to play out, despite the fact that the CEO, Elon Musk, works very, very hard to convince people not to like him or his products. So the fact that they're selling more cars without advertising, what I consider negative advertising, it just shows you if actually Tesla focused on its EV business and built real advertising around the vehicles, that they could do very, very well. So that's the good side. The bad side is they don't want to sell EVs. They want to be a cab company and they want to make robots. They want to be this autonomous company. And what that's doing is it's rapidly increasing their operating costs, because they're trying to operate a robo-taxi business that basically doesn't earn revenue. And then they're trying to build an Optimus robot, which is a ton of CapEx, on top of wanting to build a terafab, which is even more CapEx. So Tesla's like in this stage where it's like on this boat that's going somewhere that Elon wants you to believe in, but it's not going to get to the dock anytime soon. And investors have a real reason to question this vision. And that's kind of like where Tesla's at.
Mm-hmm. Shana, welcome to the party.
Sorry, I'm on vacation, so I'm doing this remote, and it's always interesting to try to get your camera to work right.
I've been there. Well, Shana Sissel, the queen of alternatives. We are starting off with Mr. Musk, all things Musk, but we are absolutely going to get to alternatives, and specifically private credit has been a big story the first half of this year. Shana is also CEO of Banrion Capital Management. Shana, I know you were getting the camera in focus, but we started off talking a little bit about Tesla's earnings. Did you have a chance to look at those that came out yesterday? Did you see some things you like, see some things you don't like?
So I got to be honest, I am not a big follower of Tesla as a stock. It's not one of the names that's on my radar screen. It never really has been. Everything Ross was just saying is kind of the reason it's not a stock I've really followed. I do follow it in the sense that it's an important stock, in just that Elon's impact on the U.S. economy is huge, not just through Tesla, but through SpaceX and X and all.
She froze.
And so Shana, we have a little freeze in your screen. Ross,
she doesn't like Tesla is basically, I think, what she has.
Individual security stocks at any given time. Are you guys losing me?
You're back. You're back now.
There you go.
Yep.
You're back.
I'm back. Okay,
Yep.
That's so weird. As I was saying, it's not that I don't think it's investable. It's just that's not the world I live in. I live in the alt world. So I followed SpaceX way more than I followed Tesla, just because it's SpaceX was a private company, and I'm following the Anthropic IPO and things of that nature because I play in that world. But for me, it's not that I don't think Tesla is investable. I just don't think it's investable for the reasons people pay attention to, right?
Well,
like I think it's an evolutionary company
cap?
that's changing the world, and nothing it's doing now is what's going to make it successful. So like
I agree.
paying attention to the earnings and how many cars they sold or whatever, I just feel like that's so not the point if you own Tesla.
Right, but like, are you going to start taking these robo taxis and get rid of your car? And I mean, like that vision of a world where transportation is a service.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see yourself giving up a car anytime soon and just taking Waymos and robo taxis?
Well, I'm a control freak, so.
So that's a no.
Yeah. Well, and before I shift gears, because obviously I want to get to the big SpaceX IPO, and we'll get back to Tesla when talking about that. I mean, there's a lot of self-dealing that I want to get into with the two models.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a control freak. I can't imagine a world where I give up my car. I don't even like getting on airplanes because I like to be in control. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not a control freak, but I still agree with you. Like I don't see a world where I give up my car.
Right. But then again, there's a lot of things I thought I would never do that I do. I rely heavily on Claude and Claude Cowork and Claude Code, like in my daily life.
You think you would?
I don't know that I thought I would in the way I do. I don't know that I thought it would be as absolutely life-changing as it has become for me personally. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I just
on vacation with a bunch of people in the house that like to interrupt me. No, as I was saying, like I use Claude in a way that I never envisioned that I would use AI. And it's changed my life in ways that I don't know that I even fathomed. Like I built an entire software system myself.
I know. I mean, we're doing this internally ourselves too on Claude.
And my micro business. I mean, every 3 weeks I'm rebuilding systems because the technology it's changing at breakneck speed, and you can make things simpler and better literally every 3 weeks if you've got the capability to do that.
I literally had a call with a partner this morning who is another fintech firm, just like Banrion, that we are doing an integration with, and they have integrations with huge players, like names that just dominate fintech. And they're like, you're the easiest client we have. You like have everything lined up. It's all automated. Like all these other firms can't do. We can't do a single sign-on with you. We can't do this with them. And it's wild that me, just little old me who doesn't really like taught myself how to code in 20 minutes and just enough to know how to get Claude to do what I needed to do, can do more than like these huge organizations. I think that that's the game-changing part. And to the point with Tesla, I think Tesla as a stock, and it's the same reason why I bought a little bit of SpaceX for my son, but not for myself. I just think 20, 30 years down the road, this stock is changing the entire world. But I am almost 50, and I don't know if I'll see it, but he definitely will.
Well, and the genius of Tesla. I mean, Tesla was the first major car manufacturer to realize that they were collecting so much on-road data, and they were smart enough to start collecting it. They knew that data they were collecting, every ounce of it, would be important. That's what's making these self-driving cars possible, because of the massive, the insane, unimaginable amount of data collection that goes on with this. And this is a part of everything Elon touches now. And he's absolutely ahead of the game.
The problems that Tesla have with full self-driving, is that a lot of that data was recorded by vehicles and camera systems that aren't that good, and it isn't that usable. So what it turns out with self-driving is that 99% of the time it's pretty easy. So it's like driving like on a freeway, you're basically just following another car. So it's like really easy to like train on these things. Where full self-driving is struggling, and it's not just Tesla, it's Waymo as well, is in construction sites, for example. And if you drive through any major city, there's construction going on everywhere. And like they put the cones in random places and they detour people. And the self-driving cars are really struggling with the the randomness of human behavior around construction and around certain intersections and things that are very difficult. Now, what Waymo's done is it's taught the cars not to go there. Like, so a Waymo might take you on a route that's not the quickest way to get somewhere because it avoids troubling areas, essentially. Tesla's saying we're going to be able to drive anywhere at any time, and it just can't do that, let's say 1% of the time. But when you scale a business, you can't have a failure rate that high when it's people's lives. And that's where Tesla is stuck. So data, that's all great, but the issue isn't what it knows, it's what it doesn't know and how it reacts to it, and the randomness and changing of dealing with a city street around municipalities and construction.
So why don't we pivot and talk about SpaceX? And obviously Tesla is going to come back into this part of the conversation. But what was that? That was mid-June, I want to say, is when we got the big SpaceX IPO. And there had been so much chatter about that building up ever since they did the filing and people broke that down. I read as much of that my simple mind can digest. And it was like, kind of cool. Like I'm like a sci-fi nerd, so
yeah, it was like, definitely a killer.
I appreciated like the sci-fi component of it because it felt like you were reading kind of like a sci-fi movie pitch.
Well, it's definitely
but it was
the
a
future.
Real, IPO filing.
Well, so. I agree with you. When I read it too, people say like, what was different about this S1? And I said, well, it had pictures. Like that was nice, but. Yeah. I agree with you. A lot of the S1 was not like actually financial information. It was kind of like, here are all the moonshots that we've got going on here. But when you read about SpaceX, I was just saying this in an interview yesterday, SpaceX is way more exciting of a company than Tesla, like any way you look at it. So when I look at SpaceX, they're doing all kinds of crazy cool stuff. When I look at Tesla, to me, it's like this dying EV brand that's trying to sell cabs, And I look at SpaceX and I'm like, wow, Starlink is just a game-changing product. Starship is a game-changing product, right? And XAI is going to be a major player in AI any way you look at it. So, SpaceX is a pretty interesting investment relative to Tesla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that caught my eye too were these orbital data centers. Right. I mean, the major focus on that and the way that it's described, it makes sense. I'm not a space expert, but certainly makes sense. I mean, getting above our atmosphere, you're cutting out all that, dilution of solar energy. You're getting a way more direct access point to solar energy. You eliminate a lot of the cooling problems that we have here on, municipalities and everywhere else where they're building these data centers because you're in a, above atmosphere environment where you have some natural cooling built into it.
The viability of data centers in space is related to the cost of getting the data centers into space,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, everything you're saying from the scale perspective is true, but it doesn't account for the real factor, which is data centers are heavy, and so like getting a data center in space is expensive currently. So Starship has to work for this vision to work. And I think that's the idea is with Starship, we can make this a viable thing. But data centers in space doesn't work unless you have Starlink, and that's what makes it really interesting because you have connectivity. So you have maybe I put data in space, but now I also have connectivity in space. So you really create this like global data internet system. It's pretty amazing when you start thinking about that,
Yeah.
And so I think that vision of SpaceX maybe is 5 years away, but if you're a long-term investor, you almost kind of have to own the stock. And so the real question is, what price do I buy it at? And what I tell investors is the lowest price possible. And so you just got to be patient.
Yeah. I mean, I'll throw one more, factor into it too. I mean, when you look at the orbital, potential of Earth, I mean, if you basically from a regulatory perspective, if you can get it up there, you got it. It's yours.
You don't have the state,
it's really not something that they can. I mean, maybe Space Force will come in and start policing that, but I mean, until then, I mean, it's pretty much unregulated, right? I mean, I'm not saying wholeheartedly it's unregulated. I mean, obviously, anywhere you launch from, you're going to have to abide with regulations. But once you get it there, you've got it.
Yes and no, because what's happening now, which is not really discussed a lot, is that Russia is launching anti-Starlink satellites and we're entering a new phase where space war is a possibility, and the Russians are getting, defeated, a lot of which is because of Starlink, because they're putting these long-range drones with Starlink antennas on it, and it works amazingly. And so Russia has a huge incentive to knock out Starlink if they can. And then you put data centers in space, and then they could just knock out a data center in 2 minutes with, a killer satellite. So we're about to enter a new stage, and this could be highly lucrative for SpaceX, is that the Space Force becomes real and Star Wars becomes real. That's basically the next decade, So as we move our conflicts from Earth, our conflicts will move into space. And so as much as I agree with you, once you get it up there, yeah, that's great. You don't have like city officials bitching about emissions, but you got Russian US satellite killers up there that could just blow up your satellite too. Can't do that in Utah,
So. Ross, anything else on Musk World that we didn't cover that you want to get out there? I mean, we could do a whole show on Elon, but we got other things to talk about.
Slated some discussion in this podcast about some of the stuff from Epstein. I think I saw that in the notes. So one thing that seems to have been pushed under the rug is Elon's association with Epstein. Okay, number one. Number two, in Elon's world, SpaceX and Tesla creates a conflict of interest. You got two earnings calls. You got two different companies. He's got to merge these companies. This is a highly complex thing. I don't know what valuations one's going to get for the other. I don't know how this all works, but they got to reconcile this, okay? Because you can't have two companies, one that's better than the other, okay, and be public, because it's just a conflict of interest. Anyway, look at it, And then third, what happens to Musk when Trump is gone? Okay, so in 2 years, Trump will be gone, and there's no guarantee that a Republican's going to win. And then Musk has taken such a political position that he is on the extreme right, that when the left comes back, they will be targeting him. So that's not a good thing. And I'm a long-term investor. So when I start thinking about SpaceX 5 years from now, that also is predicated on, policies that are friendly to Elon.
Yep. So I know. I think Shana's working on her connection, and I'm hoping we can bring her back when we get into private credit. Because I
don't know where she is. She doesn't have internet. She's like somewhere that doesn't have good internet.
She needs some Starlink.
She needs Starlink. I got a Starlink backup. I have 2 Starlink backups here at my house. That saved my life. Starlink saved my life during the Palisades fire.
Yeah. I remember following your posts during that. I mean, you were one of on X, you were one of the must-read feeds during that nightmare. I remember vividly.
Yeah, well, because
I set alerts on everything you posted. Yeah, because you were there. Exactly.
I was there. I went. I fought the fire. I lived. I saved my house and my neighborhood, and with a small group of guys, and we had a tremendous support from our spouses and helping get the resources we needed to survive for 3 days without anything, and Starlink and electric vehicles were a crucial part of my survival, like a crucial part. And boy, when you're going through a natural disaster, you can kind of see it in this documentary, the Costa Concordia documentary on Netflix, which is really good. It's about a boat that crashed in Italy a while back. And you can see how all the people talk about going through this and they're making decision-making. And some make good decisions and some make bad decisions. It's very accurate in what it's actually like to be in a natural disaster and trying to survive, because you have to make a lot of decisions that you have very limited information about, and some of them are good and some are bad. And fortunately for me, I made lots of good decisions based off limited amount of information that saved me, and I was cautious enough not to put myself, I was almost in a very bad situation, but I got out of it. And so, nothing like a Starlink when you're stuck with nothing, no way to communicate with anybody, All
right. So Shana, we've got you back. You're coming in good. I want to go right to you because
we're buying you a Starlink, Shana. You can put it in your
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
No.
I'm in Maine at the beach. Apparently, Maine needs Starlink.
Well, yeah, it's Maine. I mean,
we're saying, yeah. Yep. So Shana, I'm gonna let
Apparently,
you.
Maine needs some Starlink because I don't know what just happened.
This is
And-
like
and-
the only time of year you can go to Maine. It's like the best time of year to go to Maine by far.
So
Exactly.
Shana, if you want to have any last thoughts on Elon, but I'm going to give you a combo question. Any last thoughts on Elon, or let's go right to private credit, because a lot of casual investors and private credit is now top of mind to a lot of retail investors, where it didn't used to be because it has been retailized, however you say it. It has, become, accessible to retail investors in recent years, especially the past, 12 to 18 months. So Shana, again, any final thoughts on Elon, or we can go right into private credit? What's going on? Because that has been a big headline for the first half of this year.
So I'll just go right into private credit. I don't have a lot to add on Elon, but in terms of private credit, all right. So now you're talking my language, but I have a very differentiated view, or at least I think it's differentiated, because every time I turn on the talking heads, and I'm not one of them, I hear people talking their book. And I think that private credit's not the problem per se. It's the upper tier private credit and the money chasing huge deals that's the problem, because private credit took over where the banks decided they didn't want to be anymore, right? So after the great financial crisis, the banks lending, the way that they were lending to the capital markets, the way that they were lending to small businesses changed.
Yeah, they don't lend.
Business to access capital, they had to look for non-bank lenders, and it just grew from there because
That's
it
good.
was accessible and people would put money into it. So now what has happened is, when they opened it up, the democratization, and I am the queen of alts, I love and I'm fully supportive of the democratization of alts. My problem is that it's these massive behemoth asset managers raising $20 billion funds looking to put money to work in deal sizes that only like 0.5% of all companies in the United States even qualify for and are looking for. So now they're competing against each other for those deals, and the banks and those same companies could issue into the markets if they wanted to, right? So then they have to compete on terms, not in the way that in the lower middle market that they cap access for majority in the United States, and where the money should be flowing, where investors should be considering, is lower middle market, $25 million deals and below. Every private credit fund I talk to that's very focused and niche in specific sectors, like we have one on our platform that only does Pacific Northwest, asset heavy, no tech, right? They have hundreds of deals they see a month, and they do like 2, and they can't raise money because no one wants to give them to these like smaller niche funds. And so they have way more demand and way more deal flow than they can actually invest. But that's where the opportunity lies. And that is actually a really important aspect of the capital markets right now, because that is where the banks used to play and don't play anymore. So it needs to be there. And it really does concern me how much money flew into like these massive mega funds that like could only invest in a very small pool of deals, and they all had to compete against each other for it, and they had to put money to work because they're doing it in interval funds, right? They're not doing it in capital call funds. They can't just wait. So when you do it in an interval fund, most of these managers have never had to manage cash before, but now they have to. And now they have to put money to work, right? Because they have to put the cash that comes in to work. It's just, it's not that I dislike interval funds, and it's not even that I don't think interval funds are the right structure for some of this stuff. It's just not the right structure for that.
Well,
and that's where everybody got in trouble. I also don't think we've educated people enough on interval funds.
No, you've hit the problem on the head, like 100%. There's only so many deals that you can do for $20 billion that are going to be high quality when most of the lending is small, and it's hard to scale. And that's why those big companies did so many bad deals is exactly what you're saying. They raise all this money and they got to put it to work. So they start listening to a bunch of garbage from people who want tons of money, and they just are funding garbage. This is when there's too much easy money and, you know, something gets hot, you get all this capital in exactly what you're saying. They have to put it to work. They're not going to say, look, I just don't see deals that make any sense. That's what the prudent person does. But
well, that's what they could do when they had the capital call structure, right? You don't call capital until you have something to put it in.
Right,
but they launch these things in interval funds, and you can't do that with that.
Right, but you don't get paid, and that's the whole point. They want to get paid.
Yep.
And you said it on the head. I got to put the money to work, or I don't get paid. And so they just put it to work in garbage. And now we got so much garbage out there, they don't know where to put it. You know.
And what about how some of these mega, you know, asset managers in this space work? You know, they touch private credit, they touch a lot of other lines. You know, I've been tweeting about Apollo a lot, not even because of what's going on in private credit, but because of Epstein, and we'll get to that in a little bit. but I learned a lot about what's going on in the private credit market through that research and how some of these deals are made. You know, when you've got behemoths like that who are buying up insurers, who are then you know buying back into private credit.
That's right.
You know, we talked about self-dealing with Elon, Tesla, and all his brands. I mean, you know, when you look at the self-dealing with some of this, and not only that, I mean, they're buying up CPAs and getting non-public information for some of the bets that they're making too. You know, I mean, it's you know, public markets. We have a good sense of how that works.
They make products and sell them to themselves. That's what they do.
Right. Well, that's the big problem. And I don't hate all large asset managers, but I do think, and I mean, the whole reason I started my company was because I felt like there was this massive market of smaller boutique firms that are doing things the right way, that are accessible, that you can get a PM on the phone. There's a lot of those. And nobody will touch them. Nobody will touch them because all the big guys that I compete against, their investors are all those big asset managers. And look, I would love to get capital from one of those big asset managers too, but the entire value proposition for what I want to build is about centering around what's right for the advisor and what's right for the advisor's client, and finding partners who want to work with advisors and their clients, who will get on the phone, who will hop on a plane, who can talk to you about exactly what they're investing in and have this nuance, and also connect on a personal level with some of this stuff. I talk about one of our partners, the one I was just referring to, like, he can get on a phone and review a term sheet for a small business owner who's looking for capital, even if he can't do it. There's not going to be somebody at one of these big asset managers, and I'm not naming them on purpose because some of them do come to us and want to work with us. And, you know, I don't want to like kill my business. But my point being is, I'm not afraid to call out when bad things are happening. Like, I thought the State Street ETF of private credit is crap. And I called that out, and I know Apollo was part of that, but I thought it was bad product. I think I've gone on the record, there's so much bad product in the buffer world, like the Calamos, and Calamos is in my backyard, but the Calamos Bitcoin buffers are the dumbest things I've ever seen.
It is.
But there's ridiculous. So much good marketing behind it, and advisors get themselves in trouble because they get sold this like really pretty package. And
these companies have distribution. That's what it is.
Right. And that's the whole problem. So the whole reason I started my company was to kind of help the little guy understand distribution and talk to advisors and be like, look, guys, there's other stuff out there, and these people are better partners for you. And that's how I wanted to play the market. And it's like anybody who's got 25 billion or less in AUM falls into this bucket. Like, it's wild to me how many people fall into this bucket, and how much my competitors charge them to be on platform is wild. But my point is that when it comes to what Ross was talking about, and in terms of like these big guys, they're just gathering assets for the sake of gathering assets to get paid. They're not really doing something that the market's asking for per se, but they have the marketing machines behind them, and they have the distribution.
And there's higher fees.
Even with that, though, some of them still struggle because they can't speak the language of advisors. And now advisors are wary of alts in general because of stuff that's happening. And I think that's sad, because I think that is actually how you grow and build your business in a world where fee compression is everywhere and everybody can give you a Fidelity model, including Fidelity. So I just think that in this world, before everybody's ready to throw private credit out and talk about all this stuff, they really have to consider how important private credit is to, the pizza place down the street or the small startup or the people who are really making a difference in their community, trying to do something with a good value proposition, wanting to work with you, wanting to support you, helping you with your business, helping you bring in business. Those are the people that tap into the private credit markets, and there's a wealth of opportunity there. But, Fidelity has suspended long short managers from getting on their platform and won't let you allocate to even the ones that are on there. And it's all about, like, can I get on Fidelity or Schwab? And it's just, it's not meant for retail to win here. And that's the thing that I think is a problem.
We put a product on Fidelity, and there's a way to do it. And it's an internal real estate product that my partner started. That said, maybe private credit now just needs to change its name back to junk bonds, because I think when you say private credit, now everybody's scared. So junk bonds isn't like a bad thing anymore,
Right.
But I there's certainly a place in portfolios for these things, like earning a high yield and taking a certain level of risk on a medium-sized company on a loan is not a bad way to do it. Okay. It's not at all. But it also comes back to the managers themselves. And one of the reasons we don't do private credit for the most part is we say, what's the fee? Okay.
Right.
And these guys charge so much money. See, you're talking about fee compression. So I'm the advisor. I get the client. I manage $5 billion. Okay. You want some of my money. Okay. Why are you making 3 times as much as me? Okay. Doesn't work that way. Okay.
Oh, I agree.
None of these managers want to be in the world of fees. So if you look at what Bill Ackman just did, he just launched a fund with 1 in 10, and then he launches a fund, the next one with just a flat 2%. And he can't sell this thing to save his life at a 2% free. I run an ETF with a 75 basis point fee, and people consider that high. You see what I'm saying? And yet, like, the ETF like breaks even. You know what I mean? And so it's like,
well, I like that. Yeah.
So private credit and private managers need to understand that their fees need to come in line with the fees of other advisors if they want us to sell their products. And then it would make more sense for everybody, and clients win because we have to do what's best for the client. So if you're charging 2 and 20, I just say no.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I also think that there needs to be education on, in some cases, a higher fee is necessary. Like, I have this beef all the time with ETFs, especially alt ETFs, that the SEC's just rules and how you calculate the fee is not actually based on reality, and they make them put stuff back into it, and so you have to look under the cover, but people don't want to do that, and managers don't want to have to explain it, which also drives me nuts. It's like, well, I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to fix my deck, and I like, why won't they just buy it? I have good returns. And again, to your point, you're a fiduciary. You have to do what's in the best interest of your clients, and it doesn't work that way. And I would say 99% of the work that I do.
So they say, what's the fee? Because they know they can make 15% in the S&P a year.
Right.
So it's like private credit and private equity have to compete with that, and that's probably the worst thing, is that the S&P's averaged 15% over the last 5 years, and so like nobody can beat the S&P, and so that's actually what most people just buy. Like, we sell the S&P to like the majority of clients because that's actually what they want, and so our ETF is meant to like give you some alpha on top of that. It's our top 25 or 30 stocks. But, when you talk about portfolio diversification, privates has a place, and we want to use those investments, kind of like what you're saying, the good ones. But the managers have to understand that the clients are looking at fees first, not returns, because they can get 15 in the S&P.
No, we had a roundtable for one of our clients the other day, and he hasn't been struggling to raise money. And so we got a bunch of advisors on there and we basically said, like, tell him. And their number one thing was like, your returns aren't as good as you think because you're taking so much in your fee. And it was like the first time that he heard that because it was coming from them. But and then he tried to justify it. And at the end of the day, the advisor was like, look, your returns aren't as good as this other private equity guy who has better returns and a smaller fee. I'm not going to use you. I don't care what your story is. Right. And while advisors do love stories, that's one thing. But I will disagree with you on one thing. And I talk about this a lot. In a world where financial advice is more readily available and everybody is competing to give it and to get your assets, advisors really do have to find a way to connect better with their clients. And I am on the record as saying that alternatives are like the only way to do that. And what I mean by that is, if you have a client, for example, that is very, very passionate about supporting women's causes and they give to Girls Inc. and they're involved in that. And I come to you and say, hey, I have a VC fund that only invests in female entrepreneurs. Like, they're going to jump at that. If I have a client that's a huge sports fan and I can get them in a sports rights fund and they can say they own a piece of their favorite, they want that. And it's not always about, am I getting the best return ever? I always say an advisor will never get fired because you didn't beat the S&P. You will absolutely get fired if you fail to get their assets to where they need to be to meet whatever goal that you're managing their assets for 100% of the time. But no one gives you bonus points because you beat the S&P by 10,000, 1,000 basis points or 500 basis points or 200 basis points, or you're just the same. But if I can live my entire life and have the income I need and travel the world and I don't have to worry about it, that's all the clients really care about. And I think we get really caught up on like, did I crush the S&P? Am I the top 1%? Like, yes, that matters. You certainly don't want to not do well. You don't want to lose money for your clients. But at the end of the day, in all the years I did manager research, I don't think I ever fired somebody for performance, ever.
Well, I mean, I don't think we lose many clients so that we have good performance of that.
Well, that's because you're good at your job.
I think products that are specific to causes over history have failed to perform well.
But you're thinking of it in more
liquidity. The problem with private in general is liquidity. That's what it really comes down to.
Right.
Is that I personally have invested in many private investments over the last several decades, and how many of them have actually paid off and were liquid, and it's very, very low. So that's part of the argument as well. If you take 100 private credit funds that were started in the last 5 years and you track not their performance, but like, did people get paid out? Like right now, people just can't get their money out of these products. So it's real bad advertising, for us, liquidity.
But that's not true with all of them, because there are private credit funds that are paying you a 10, 12 handle every year in income and have like a 5-year lockup. And a lot of clients would be cool with that. If I had $1 million and I could get $100,000 a year in income and live off that,
they want their money back, and that's not what's happening.
Right.
And it's just not what's happening.
Right.
And so
look,
it's not to say that every fund is bad, because we know that's not true.
No, but that's why you have to have conversations about liquidity budgets, like how much are you willing to do that, and like that's where a lot of times I think making those personal connections can matter. Because like I always give the example, if I could buy a very small piece of the Boston Celtics, right? I would have to be going completely bankrupt and the court forced me to sell that position before I'd sell that position, because then I couldn't tell everybody I was an owner of the Boston Celtics. Like there is a psychological behavioral aspect to it. But like my point being is that it's not the center of your portfolio. I'm never going to be one that says alt should be a big part. It should be kind of around the edges. And I think for advisors, the way that you get to know your clients, the way you can be differentiated is to find ways to align not only the core of their investments, do their work, but align that small portion with a liquidity budget and with whatever values or ego-oriented things they want to do. Because people are doing it anyways. Like people are like, oh, I want to buy a plane, or oh, I want that fancy car that's not going to make any money. Right. It's not like people don't take fund money and do that. Like, why not make it in a way that
I support a lot of music causes, and I had a music company once, and I realized it should have just been a nonprofit, So you can support a lot of causes with just donating money. But that said, versus losing it, That said, what you're saying is
Right.
100% true. No person with $50 million isn't going to have some private investments. The question is somebody with a $2 million net worth need it? And the answer is no.
Right.
But with somebody when 10 million plus, like you got to have a slice in private investments. But what you're saying, I think, is the most important thing. Do not buy these big company products. You need to do the work, whether it's find somebody like you who does the work or do the work yourself. But you're much better off investing in smaller funds where you actually know what they're actually doing, and you can look at each investment and say, this makes sense to me, what they're doing. And then you invest in that and you have liquidity in other areas of your portfolio. Especially because private credit earns you income, it's a very attractive asset. More to me than private equity, because private equity, you don't get anything. With private credit, you still earn.
Not only do you not get anything, but right now you're not even getting like an equity premium in private equity. You're getting nothing.
Right. So
you're getting locked up, and you're not even outperforming the S&P.
Right, and in
the interval funds, it's even worse because of how they have to price them. It looks like they're flat.
100%, 100%.
Like,
but what you're saying is true. The banks do not lend to small and mid-sized businesses like mine. Like if I go into a bank as a $5 billion IRA, they're not lending to me for anything less than double digits. If I go to private, I've got capital all over the place that they want to give. You see what I'm saying? And so thank God for private credit in a lot of ways if you're a small business owner, if you're a medium-sized business owner. So it fills a niche. But when anything gets too popular, same thing happens with Bitcoin or stocks. When anything gets too popular and you get all this money flooding in, that's when people start making bad investments. And that's the only crime that happened with private credit. It's not that the asset class itself is problematic. It's that these BlackRocks and whoever, they're in the raising money business. You said it. And they just raise all this money and they have to put it to work. And, it's the same issue I have. If I get $1 billion in tomorrow, I can't put it all to work right now because of where the markets are at. So for us, we park money in different bonds and different areas to earn interest until we can put the money to work. So we're still earning our clients' income. There's actually pretty good incomes now, even in the public markets. But when you're a private manager, you either don't call the capital, so then you don't get paid, or you have the capital, and you have to put it to work. And that's the flaw in the system.
And then they get really creative. My favorite creative thing that's come out recently is tertiaries. When private equity needs to get out, so they sell it to another private equity fund. Tertiaries are wild to me. But our industry is epically good at creating these products to do this stuff.
To solve somebody's
and that's why you just have to do the work. There's no easy button here.
Nobody's ever made a lot of money investing because they were just lucky. Maybe one or two people, but it's not the way you want to try, right? And so the bottom line, which is what both of us do, is we put a lot of time into researching the investments we're making for clients. And most clients don't even really understand how much time we put in, because they don't realize on the weekends we're reading these S1 documents or we're reading earnings reports and doing these things. And then after work, I might have to digest all, just the last 24 hours have been insane for me. I'm on 6 shows. I got to digest 14 companies' earnings and tell people right away my opinion. It's a lot of work to be good at investing. And I think a lot of people want the upside, but don't realize what it really takes. There's no easy money.
And to your point about that.
Final point on this, Shana, you get final word on this. Yep, go.
I was going to say, it takes a lot of work, and Ross can totally appreciate this, to go on TV and put yourself out there too. Everybody can keep a tab on how many times we were right or wrong, and they're very happy to tell us when we are wrong, and they're very happy to tell us that they think we're stupid and idiots and whatever. But the amount of work that you and I put in to go on a show would blow people's minds. The amount of reading I do on the weekend, the amount of times I'm up till 3 o'clock in the morning reading research reports, and then I have to take all this information and make a little mosaic out of it and basically tell you my opinion. And there's it's like baseball. The chances that I'm right 100% of the time are 0 to none. And sometimes
And
when
remember,
you're
not allowed
right,
to
you
change your
want to go
opinion,
out.
too.
You're like, see, you're an idiot. I was right, but like, there's no upside
No,
to
and
any
you
of
can't
that.
change your
What
opinion.
we
You
do
know, like
is hard.
I thought something 2 years ago, and I've changed my opinion. And then you change your opinion, they attack you for changing your opinion. I go, listen, you want me to
Yep.
tell you the truth, or you want me to just keep going down the boat that I don't like anymore? You know, and it's like,
Right.
but you know,
I learned something. Something happened. The markets are one of the reasons I love what
Yeah.
we do is it's never
yeah,
boring,
changing.
and you can always learn something new.
You're always learning. It's always changing, and it's always hard.
So I want to
Exactly.
go back to
Waiting for the easy
Elon
thing.
to introduce the next topic, and this all comes full circle
Okay.
too. It's going to have private. It's going to have Elon. It's going to have private credit. It's something that brings all the billionaires together. One thing a lot
Right.
of them have in common, and that is Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein got new life. This investigation that was basically put on ice. We never thought we were going to get to see the files until Elon Musk was, to his credit, the one who tweeted out, the reason why Donald Trump's not releasing the files is because he's in them. This was when Elon and Donald, now they're getting along again, but if you remember, they had their bromance at the start of Trump's term in 2015. And I had a January show when all that was coming together. And literally I said, my prediction, we all say things on camera that some of them are right, some of them are wrong. I said, I don't think it's going to end well, this bromance between the two. And when that tweet came out after they had their messy breakup, where Elon basically said, Trump's not releasing them because he's in them. Now, Elon failed to mention he's also in them, so that's a little problematic. But anyways, I credit Elon because that tweet got bipartisan support. I mean, the Epstein files are the one few overwhelmingly bipartisan thing where people across ideological spectrums all want transparency there. Okay, there were hundreds of females, some women, some girls, who were hurt in the most awful ways and exploited and abused by Epstein's the one that was at the head of it, but it wasn't just him.
No.
And this was a network of some very
Yeah,
big.
so it's
One of them
it's
gets
wild.
conspiracy
I
bias.
have purposely stayed away from reading a lot of that stuff because I came from the world that got exploited, right? So I was a not so successful model back in the day, but I have, because of that, a lot of friends that were like very successful in that world. I also come from the pageant world, which, Donald Trump owned Miss USA forever. Half of my friends have met him and a million times, and they all have varying opinions of him. But my point is, I don't like reading the files because a lot of people I know personally are in them, or there are people that I have come across over the years who I never would imagine. And it's just, it causes me so much pain to read that. But I know girls who were affected. There are so many people I know that were approached by Epstein, were invited to do things with Epstein, were abused through that circle. And it's really mind-blowing and eye-opening how pervasive it is across the globe and how many people were involved. And literally, I'm more surprised by who's not in the Epstein files these days than who is.
And there's still a battle over
that's
getting all the documents are not out.
No.
Yeah.
There's a big battle over that. Some of the documents that were withheld because they were exchanges in foreign languages, and the DOJ didn't want to dedicate, or they claimed they didn't want to dedicate resources. You know what? Any exchanges that were part of that investigation that were written, that were all foreign language exchanges, those are the ones we should probably see. Those are probably some of the biggest bombshells that have not come to the public's attention. And then there's a lot of simple exchanges in there too, that are what should be simple exchanges that have heavy redactions.
Yes.
Obviously, we want victims protected, and the DOJ didn't even do a good job of that.
Right.
The first round that they released, they didn't even know how to properly redact things, so that while it appeared it was redacted, anybody could go over that PDF with their cursor and highlight it and paste it to see what was under it, and they had to go back and clean that up. Yeah.
Well, they were focused on protecting one person.
Right.
And then the second part of it is I'm tired of it being called the Epstein files. It's really the Trump Epstein files, and the fact that he's in thousands of pages of documents. I mean, it's so incriminating. Shana brought up her experience in the modeling world. Now, I personally was not a model, but I dated many. And when I was younger, one of them had an interaction with Donald Trump. And it's a well-known person now. And the stories I heard were horrendous. Okay. And so I don't think anybody's making up anything.
Yeah.
Here, okay. And these are like real people who are really harmed by a group of men. And it was a global sex trafficking conspiracy is what it was. Now, one of the guys just randomly died this week. And they're still trying to figure out how.
Yep. That's all I see on the news. He's a modeling agent.
Yeah, he's a modeling agent, right?
Oh,
and it was a whole modeling agency scam. But the fact that the U.S. perpetrators of these crimes have not been prosecuted, have not had repercussions. For example, the guy running the LA Olympics, okay, completely involved with Epstein and Maxwell. He's still running the LA Olympics. What's his name? Wasserman, okay? And this kid, just keeps putting his head down, and hopefully nobody will notice that nothing has happened to him, okay? Nothing has happened to Bill Gates. Bill Gates was so involved with this, it's beyond disgusting. And nothing has happened to Bill Gates except Warren Buffett won't donate money to his charity, okay? But Bill Gates is a criminal, okay? It's simple as that. And nobody will prosecute these people. Why? Because of who's in charge, okay? So in 2 years or 3 years, when other people are in charge, maybe there'll be some repercussions to the criminals who perpetrated these sex crimes. But in every other country, they're busting these people. I mean, look at what happened to Prince Andrew. It's never happened in the history of England.
In America, it's literally Maxwell's the only one doing hard time.
Right. She's
a woman.
Right.
A woman is the only one we actually gave any meaningful sentence to. People have lost their jobs, which is appropriate. I mean, listen, private organizations can get rid of somebody who's got a reputational problem. They don't have to be convicted to get fired.
I mean, people get
somebody
fired.
Somebody doesn't have to break laws for you to fire them.
Right.
You know?
But being fired,
and that should be the standard. Oh well, and I keep hearing that argument. Oh well, you didn't. Okay, even though this guy's in the files 500, 1,000 times, there's no evidence he did anything wrong to a individual woman. Well, first off, there might not be evidence of that, but we still have a lot of redactions and some pretty twisted email exchanges. So if we actually got to see the full files, some of those guys were claiming, "Oh, see, I did nothing wrong." You still might have.
I think there's plenty of evidence.
even just being looped up into that world, it's massively poor judgment. I'll give Bill Gates credit. At least Bill Gates came out and said it was a massive misjudgment. He regrets it. He was convincing. He had a lot of PR coaching. But it was convincing, and it rhymed with sincerity.
Everywhere Bill Gates goes, he hits on girls. Everywhere he goes. Okay, he's been doing this forever. I know these things. You know what I'm saying? It's like these people. It's like because they have so much money, they just like get a pass on any ethical responsibility for their actions. And it just was never like this before in America. Before in America, if you were a high profile person and you did anything, you would be destroyed. Like anything. You cheated on your wife. Just that would destroy your career. Okay? You smoked a little weed. Bill Clinton heard about it for his whole fucking career. I didn't inhale. That's how small of an infraction could destroy you. And now we have literally videos and pictures and tapes of Bill Clinton with little girls in a jacuzzi, and nothing has happened to him. His wife won't even divorce him. Okay? My wife gets mad if I look at somebody. Okay? And like, how is Hillary Clinton call herself a Clinton?
Well, girl, she's just as involved as any of them.
Right?
No, she's in the files. She's in the files.
And she was deposed. I mean, I watched both Bill and Hillary's, separate video. Or they were voluntary appearances. They weren't sworn depositions. But it was. I mean, the funny thing with Bill, Like, and a lot of people reported this, but I had to watch it to like see it in real time. When they were showing him some of the pictures, it was like a guy going through an old college yearbook. Whereas like Hillary was actually very sharp and good and fired back at some of the criticisms.
Well, she
like Hillary was still on her game. She is still sharp. Bill knows he's unimpeachable or anything at this point, so he don't care.
No, I thought Hillary did a pretty good job from her like testimony perspective, because she's certainly smart enough. But I'm still amazed at this whole thing, because it's so much worse and more pervasive than what anybody could have imagined. And when they dropped all those emails and pictures, it's hard not to like go through some of them, and you start going through this and you're like, dude.
And I've gone through those wormholes, and I went through it. I mean, we talked about Apollo. We talked about Apollo in the private credit conversation.
That's right.
I mean, now everybody is waiting for this sworn deposition. So Leon Black, Apollo founder, so he was a Milken prodigy. We talked about the junk bonds. So he came from that whole junk bond world to found Apollo. Him and his, there were the three amigos. There was Leon Black at the top. There was Mark Rowan, who is the current CEO now. Right. And then there's Josh Harris, who's, when he didn't get the CEO job, he spun off, started his own private equity, alt investment firm. He owns my Philadelphia. He owns
a bunch
Philadelphia
of
76ers.
Yeah.
He also
owns a bunch of sports teams.
The Washington Commanders, one of my least favorite.
Yep.
He owns the Devils. He owns a lot. But the thing all three of them had in common were they were all very chummy with Jeffrey Epstein, and this was after his first arrest. This was after he got that slap on the wrist, where he got a work release and did however.
Well, they're not going to give up their fun just because he got arrested, right?
Yeah, and I mean, Leon Black was his biggest bankroller, and Apollo. I read through all those files. We've got 4 minutes left. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I mean,
every time you say something about like how like bankrolls, this is just a personal frustration. I think about all the people, including myself out there, who are like doing good things, trying to make a difference, have good value propositions, who can't raise 5 cents. And people who literally light money on fire can raise $1 billion. And it has to be blackmail. It has to be stuff like that. Right? There's no other explanation.
Leon Black agreed to testify on Capitol Hill voluntarily, just like Gates did, just like Bill and Hillary did, very early on into it, before it even got to the minority. So this was still the GOP questioning period of it. And very early on into that, he and his attorney stormed out of the meeting and immediately got hit with a subpoena. So now that what should have been a voluntary interview, now he's got to come back and he's going to be under sworn deposition. If he serves that out, he's going to fight it with every tooth and nail. And I guarantee a lot of his buddies are going to help him with that fight and call in whatever favors they have. That's speculation on my part. I don't have evidence that's going to happen. But come on, there are a lot of people who do not want Leon Black testifying under sworn deposition. I know that for a fact.
That's right. And it just takes money to get out of trouble in this modern administration. So it's just about who pays who, how much, to avoid any accountability in the current, system that we have now. So this is not, when the person who's most guilty is in charge of our country, this is not the time that we're going to get accountability for the actions of many others. But as I said, in 3.5 months, there's an election, and in 2.5 years, there's a new president coming. And that might not be a Republican. And so I'm a big believer that over time, these things work themselves out. I kind of believe in this karmic thing where, these people will pay one way or another. It might take more time than we like, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. I don't know that I care what party the person comes from. It just needs to not be a 7-year-old white man. It needs to be a younger person. It needs to be somebody who is willing to challenge that old school.
You're going to get Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, I don't know that I love
don't
him.
love him.
I
love him
think
at
he's
all.
just as
he'll go after
problematic
Trump.
as others.
He'll go
I
after
know.
Trump.
I'm sitting here in Maine rooting for my buddy Scott Brown, hoping he wins New Hampshire. He might be a Republican, but he is a good dude. He's just a good guy.
Good
And that's who I want in charge. I don't really care what their party is. I just want somebody who I know has any sort of moral fortitude.
I'm with you. I'm not a party person anymore. I'm done with the parties. And actually, it's exactly what you're doing is what I'm doing. I'm supporting young people who have great ideas, and I don't care about parties.
And who want to genuinely make things better, right? Those are the people who like don't have the power. They need the backing, and I don't care what party anybody's in. Like I said, I happen to be here in Maine. Scott Brown's running for Senate in New Hampshire. He obviously was the senator of Massachusetts. That's actually how I know him. Just it's a long story, but like I randomly became friends with him even before the Kennedy seat because his wife Gail was on Channel 5, and that's when I started doing media back in 2007. But my point being is he's just a good guy. He's just a good guy who will look at a bill and make a judgment. And that's actually why he didn't get reelected, because Elizabeth Warren could sort of use, oh, you're a Republican against him, but at the same time, the Republicans weren't really for him either because he didn't always vote their way. I want that. That's what I want.
Well,
those people are the hardest people to elect, though. They're the hardest people to elect because they don't have the party machine behind them.
That's what I learned here in California.
That's why we, as the citizens of this country, have to go and do better.
But the party machine controls stuff, and it's really powerful. And I worked really hard this year.
Exactly.
And I realized very straightforward that the party machine controls the outcome, no matter how hard you push these outsiders. So there's a broken system that we're in, where these parties just control everything now, and they make them. That's how we got Xavier Becerra. You know, it's like the party just decided that when Matt Mahan was 100 times better candidate, and they're both Democrats. So why did they decide for Becerra? Because he's the insider, and like it's
because he'll do what they tell him to do.
And we
need like Teddy Roosevelt to be reincarnated.
I don't know. I'm over it. It sucks.
I'm going to add my Philly thing. Do not dismiss Josh Shapiro.
I like
that's a name that's been floated, a name you're going to see a lot more over the next few months.
I like it more than I like Gavin Newsom, that's for sure.
Ross Gerber, Shana Sissel, thank you guys so much for coming on. This was awesome. Thank you everybody who tuned in. Ross, Shana, I know we're gonna chat a little bit offline, but again, everybody who tuned in, thanks so much. In a few weeks, I'll announce next month's group, but they've got a tough act to follow. This was awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for putting up with my technical